All right, hi everyone. So today I'm going to provide an in-service on storage organization and safety standards. But before we get started on that, I do just want to clarify that this is something that you all already do an excellent job at implementing at each of your kitchens. This in-service is just simply a refresher, just reinforcing the practices that you already do daily. So with that, let's just start with a quick overview of general storage rules that apply across dry, cold, and frozen storage. So first, all items should be stored at least 6 inches off of the floors and 18 inches away from the walls because this prevents contamination, improves air circulation, and it's also easier to clean as well as monitor for any pests. Walk-ins should also not be overloaded. So too much product in an area restricts airflow and it makes it harder for the walk-ins to stay at a safe temperature, and it can raise the risk of contamination. And this is especially true in your cold and frozen storage areas. So for dry storage specifically, the temperature range should be between 50 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And humidity is also a factor here, not just temperature. So high humidity encourages the growth of mold. It increases the risk of spoilage and the risk of pests. So it can ruin products such as like flour, sugar, your cereals, or anything that comes in cardboard. So keeping products off of the floor is going to help prevent moisture absorption here. And in addition to checking your temperatures daily, if you have humidity gauges or strips, it's also good to start checking those at least once a day to make sure that the humidity in your dry storage areas is within a proper range. All of your dry goods should be kept in sealed containers or in their original packaging whenever possible. And also, you need to make sure that there are never any chemicals or sanitizer buckets stored in any of your storage areas, as well as any of your prep or service areas. So for cold storage, refrigerators must stay at or below 41 degrees Fahrenheit, and freezers must be at or below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures must be checked daily, but it is good practice to check them twice a day, such as once in the morning when you come in for the shift and once towards the end of the shift. And when you're logging temperatures on those temp logs that you have, you want to avoid checking the temps right after the walk-in doors have been opened repeatedly, or such as when you are getting deliveries, because this is going to provide you with an inaccurate number. So you want to make sure that you're giving the walk-in time to stabilize before you take that temperature reading. Proper shelving order is also going to prevent cross-contamination, especially from your raw proteins. So here we're looking at our cold storage. So the rule here is simple. You want to store your foods based upon their required cooking temperature. So the higher the cooking temp, the lower the shelf that the food item should be on. So for example, your top shelf is going to be your ready to eat foods. So this is going to be like your salads, your washed produce, any deli meats and cheeses, sauces, baked goods, any leftovers that you may have that are ready to serve. You want to keep those on the top. Your second shelf would then be items like eggs and fish because they have a lower required cooking temperature than beef and poultry do. Then your third shelf would be your whole cuts of beef and pork because they require a higher temperature than eggs and fish. Your fourth shelf would then be your ground beef because that requires a higher cooking temperature because there's an increased risk of foodborne illnesses in your ground beef. And then lastly, the very bottom shelf should always be your poultry. So your raw chicken and turkey is always going to be at the bottom because they require the highest cooking temperature, and you never want these items to drip onto your other foods. Since you guys have a lot of milk in your K through 12 kitchens, we also want to make sure that they have a dedicated shelf space. So since milk is considered a ready-to-eat item, you don't want them to be near any of your raw meat, fish, or poultry. So those items should never be stored above your milk. So it's just a good rule of practice to just have milk in its own designated area. So as long as there's a pallet on the floor that's raised 6 inches above the ground, you can have milk crates sitting on top of those. For date marking, everything needs to be labeled. This is a key part in food safety. So if you are taking food out of its original packaging and you are placing it into another container, even if it's something that you know what the item is, even if it's jelly or any sort of cut produce like cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers, deli meat, anything like that, it has to be labeled with the name of the product because when people do audits, this is something that you can get docked on. Date marking is critical for food safety, for especially your ready to eat foods or your time and temperature control safety foods that aren't going to be used within 24 hours. And these items can be kept for 7 days max once they have been prepared. But again, you guys know your kitchens best, so you would recognize if something is going to spoil before that 7 day period. But this is just a major like rule of thumb that you have a maximum 7 days to store an item once it has been like prepared. Say you have leftovers from lunch service, you can only hold that item for 7 days. So labels have to be clear and readable on these foods, including the name of the food. Again, even if it's obvious what it is, it's just a good rule of practice to have the name written on it, as well as the date that this food was prepared and the date that it must be discarded. So counting 7 days from the date that you prepared it, write down the discard date. For both your dry and your cold storage, you want to label items with the date that they were received. And ideally, also, you should write down their expiration or their best buy date. And of course, you always want to follow FIFO, which is first in, first out method. So this helps to use the oldest products first to prevent waste, and it reduces the risk of using expired items. So whenever you get your deliveries, just put your newer items behind your older items. All right, so that is everything that I have for you guys today. Now that you've watched this video, please use the link that you received in your email to complete the quiz and the presentation evaluation. There's also a space on the form to include any questions that you may have after viewing this video, or you can also reach out to Nikki or myself directly with any questions that you have. Thank you so much, guys, for all the work that you do. I really enjoyed meeting you and working with all of you, and thank you so much for watching.